Sustainability Services. He's a co-director of Pakistan Air Quality Initiative and a non-executive director at Climate Finance Pakistan. He's also a member of Pakistan Air Quality Experts Group that is building solutions to air pollution in the country. He has gotten LEED certification from GBCI, and he holds expertise in sustainability, emission assessments, risk assessments under climate finance, and environmental policy. So, welcome, Dawar. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Nazifa. All good. I think it's been a few days where Lahore has gotten some respite, but otherwise, it's been a whole episode in more than 10 days when we all experience pretty bad air quality. Other than that, I think overall it's been good.
Great. Okay, so to set the stage, I would like you to sort of reiterate on the fact that, what are the clear and crisp black and white sectors that are the main contributors to smog, because a lot of people say that it's the industry, some people blame the agriculture sector and so on and so forth. So who are the sectors जो कि सबसे ज्यादा contribute कर रहे हैं, and has nature and are there any climate induced effects जो कि इसके अंदर smog को create करने में कुछ role play करते हैं, transboundary action कुछ बीच में involved है नहीं है? So yeah, please.
So starting off, I think हमारे यहाँ we need to see this as a very scientific sort of problem. क्योंकि sources of emissions in a lot of cases for all cities remain consistent throughout the year. But in South Asia and some other regions in the world, there are seasonal patterns or seasonal changes in those emission sources. And one of the things, this is an outcome of the economic model of that particular region. So in our region, you would know that we have agricultural and lands, and both Pakistan and India, large parts are still rural areas dependent on agriculture as the primary mode of economics. And hence that particular mode is seen to be sort of becoming more and more inefficient in terms of providing profits to farmers and not making the bottom line for them. So essentially, in the winter period, particularly post monsoon, we have this season of crop burning now. It has been always the case in the plains of Punjab, but it has gradually gotten worse. At the same time, both sides of Punjab, the emission sources have also increased. So when you look at the sources of emission, you have to look at different periods of the year now. So your annual sources of emission will look very different than your seasonal sources of emission. So let's say you divide the 12 months of the calendar year into the quarters. So for the middle quarters, which is basically spring and summer, sources are slightly different. And for winter and autumn, it's going to be different.
Hmm.
And during the autumn period, particularly post-monsoon, this is when the crop burning emissions also come into play. So say that all around the year, you have six big sources of emission, which is transport, then you have industry, then you have agriculture, including the crop burning slash and burn agriculture, then domestic and residential fuel use, especially in the rural areas, and then you have construction, and then on the background, you also have additional sectors. In some cases, it could be aviation. For example, in Karachi, the shipping and port industry would be a major contributor. But it could in Lahore or Punjab, that can't be the case. So fugitive dust or these other sectors are sort of categorized. So six in total. All around the year, transport and industry are the sort of primary contributors. And transport, because our transport vehicle population has skyrocketed over the last 15 years. So it's a major source. Similarly, there is industrial development in big urban centers, such as the ARI region, which we call the GT Road Trapezium or GT Road Triangle. This has become very industrialized. So it has transport, it has agriculture, and then it also has a lot of industry and also a lot of informal industry, which still uses conventional combustion sources. And then on top of that, you have these episodes of peak crop burning, say the first 10 days of November. You have fugitive dust coming in from the Central Asian region, in some cases also the dry region in South Punjab, and that continues to add on to it. And of course, you mentioned transboundary. So depending on the movement of the wind, it's either going from west to east or east to west. So this happens all throughout the year. In some cases, the patterns stay stagnant for a bit. In some cases, they keep on changing. So this does impact the overall sources of pollution. Uh,
Right.
Regarding what climate change is doing, so we do have some initial studies coming out, and not a lot of them from South Asia. So this is a big issue in research
Mm.
and scientific knowledge. Some initial studies have come out which point that when the summer sort of dipole is changing from El Nino to La Nina, during this period, the winter gets slightly more intense and the winds are more stagnant during the post-monsoon season. So the change in the wind and more stagnant air does lead to much more smog buildup, which we are observing this year. So on our side and on even on the Indian side, whenever the wind stops, the building up of emissions is a lot higher. So this year in particular is slightly different than what we've observed in the past.
Yeah. And so there's of course a lot of people don't know कि ये smog और fog का difference क्या है. But
Hmm.
please explain that also, and if possible, go bilingual here. And also कि जो smog की एक trajectory सी नजर आती है, ये past कुछ years में बहुत ज्यादा ही बढ़ती जा रही है. If you see the graphs, it has just gone exponentially high. So, uska
Yeah.
kya reason hai? Same reasons that you are telling me, or is there something else that is adding to it, or what?
No, no, definitely it's the similar reasons. For example, in 2021, you had 4 million bicycles in Lahore. Now I was looking at the data for 2024, it's already 5.1 million. So over a period of 2.5 years or 3 years, you have 1 million more bikes in Lahore, registered in Lahore. So those sources are consistently increasing. Every year on year, you have aggregated growth rate, which is going to the vehicle population, a bit of industrial fuel use. You also have power plants in Lahore, which are polluting as well because they depend on old technology. And in all of these combustion sources, we are using fuel which is not up to the global standards. So that remains an issue that you are increasing the point sources of pollution, which use form of combustion or fuel जो आपका फ्यूल क्वालिटी है जिसे हम आम जुबान में ईंधन कहते हैं वो हर जगह ही इट्स वेरी डर्टी सल्फर कंटेंट ज्यादा होती है उसके साथ पर्टिकुलेट ज्यादा निकलता है एंड इवेंचुअली वही बिल्डअप होता जाता है इसके साथ साथ फिर हमारा जो क्रॉप बर्निंग वाला इशू है आई थिंक मैंने बताया था ये पंजाब में तो सदियों से हो रहा है क्योंकि एग्रीकल्चर पंजाब में सदियों से हो रहा है लेकिन एट द सेम टाइम हमारे यहाँ इन द लास्ट आई थिंक कपल ऑफ इयर्स ये थोड़ा सा बढ़ गया उसकी एक वजह जो एट्रीब्यूट की जाती है वो है ग्राउंड वाटर शॉर्टेजेस और उसका उसका बेसिकली रीजन उससे ये है कि इंडियन साइड पे हमारे पास यहाँ आफ्टर द इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी वी गॉट द थ्री बिग रिवर्स उनके पास तीन छोटे दरिया गए एंड उनके ग्राउंड वाटर शॉर्टेजेस शुरू हो गई इन अर्ली 2000s सो उनकी पंजाब एंड हरियाणा गवर्नमेंट इम्पोज्ड अ बैन ऑन ग्राउंड वाटर यूज कि ट्यूबवेल्स आप यूज नहीं कर सकते फॉर टिल द मॉनसून सीजन स्टार्ट्स सो होता यह है कि उन्हें पता है कि हमने मॉनसून सीजन तक हम अपना क्रॉप एक्सटेंड करेंगे एंड एट द सेम टाइम वी हैव टू कट द क्रॉप एंड प्रिपेयर फॉर द नेक्स्ट फील्ड बिकॉज वो एक बहुत लिमिटेड पीरियड रह गया So, उस लिमिटेड पीरियड की वजह से जो स्लैश एंड बर्न एग्रीकल्चर पहले 4-5 महीनों के ओवर होता था ड्यूरिंग द विंटर पीरियड वो अब इज कंस्ट्रक्ट बेसिकली कंजेस्टेड इन 1 मंथ ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ 20 to 30 days एंड उस वजह से वो पीक स्मॉग एक किस्म की आपको नजर आता है कि इन पोस्ट मानसून सीजन में यहाँ आती है एंड देन न्यू ईयर्स के पास अराउंड जनवरी अगेन यू हैव अ बिग पीक so at the same time you have these issues of seasonal and changing patterns and we do realize that at the same time these patterns will keep on changing but groundwater shortages climate change are contributing to this as I mentioned sources of pollution so sources of pollution हम notice कर रहे हैं हमारी side पे भी थोड़ी सी increase हुई है in terms of both slash and burn agriculture
Mm.
and with gas shortages now impacting parts of Punjab and all over KP as well people have especially in rural areas people have moved from cylindered gas to going back to solid fuel use
Yeah.
so जिस तरह हमारे गांव देहातों में पहले काउ डंग यूज होता है फॉर बर्निंग उसी तरह फायरवुड बायोमास काउ डंग दोबारा आ गया इन द पिक्चर instead of cleaning that whole argument. So
Mm.
domestic residential contribution increase हो रही है, especially in rural areas and in
Mm.
peri-urban areas जहाँ पे gas मौजूद नहीं. So these
Right.
have definitely increased over the past 4 or 5 years.
Hmm. So, coming to my next segment of questions. So, there's a lot of skepticism about the reliability of the air quality data that is being acquired from the low cost monitors, and the governmental officials, they tend to not endorse this data as such. So, what should be the way forward for organizations who are gathering this data, and are there any institutes to sort of authenticate the calibration of these data? मतलब इनको किस तरह से हम शो करें कि okay, ये this is authentic data.
नो सो जिस तरह बाकी सारी दुनिया है ना, पाकिस्तान पहला मुल्क नहीं है जहाँ पे एयर पोल्यूशन इशू बहुत सीरियस हुआ है। हमारे पास एग्जांपल्स हैं कि साउथ अमेरिका पूरा, लैटिन अमेरिका, फिर आपके पास चाइना, और चाइना से पहले यूरोप एंड यूएस, इन सब कंट्रीज का ये मसला रहा है किसी ना किसी टाइम पे। हो सकता है इतनी एक्सटेंट तक ना किसी का भी खराब हुआ हो। अ, लेकिन उन्होंने हर जगह, अगर आप किसी भी कंट्री का देखें सेंसर मैप, जो कि वो आपके आई थिंक वो मोर लेस ओपन रिसोर्स है नाउ। सो आप नोटिस करेंगे कि मेजॉरिटी ऑफ डिप्लॉयमेंट इज लो कॉस्ट मॉनिटर्स, और वो लो कॉस्ट मॉनिटर्स इन मोस्ट केसेस आर गवर्नमेंट बैक। And government, what it does, it gets a sample of a couple of monitors, और वो validation studies करती है कि इन लो कॉस्ट से ये डेटा आ रहा है ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ अ ईयर, हमारे पास जो रेगुलेटरी ग्रेड मॉनिटर है उससे ये डेटा आ रहा है। एंड देन दे सी द कोरिलेशन बिटवीन द टू एक्सरसाइजेज, एंड उसे फिर वो रिव्यू, प्रॉपर पीयर रिव्यू करवाते हैं, स्टडी पब्लिश होती है, एंड देन पीपल हैव एक्सेस टू दैट मटेरियल एज वेल। उस तरह की studies have more or less showed that low cost monitors have very high accuracy, both in laboratory conditions and outdoor as well. So
Hmm.
very consistently हमने notice किया है कि हर साल कोई ना कोई इस तरह की study हो रही है, and maybe Pakistan should also conduct something like this as well. A
Hmm.
good resource for this is the work that has been done in California. In California में काफी serious pollution issues थे। तो उनका जो EPA और एयर क्वालिटी मॉनिटरिंग डिस्ट्रिक्ट है, which is the South Coast AQMD, उनकी वेबसाइट है, and they have published a lot of validation studies
Hmm.
covering a whole list of low cost monitors, हर
Hmm.
किस्म की टेक्नोलॉजी का उन्होंने रिव्यू किया हुआ है to say that ये इसका रिपोर्टिंग वैलिडिटी है।
Hmm.
सो इस
Hmm.
तरह की
Hmm.
स्टडीज होंगी तो आई थिंक लॉट मोर क्लैरिटी कैन बी गेन्ड ऑन दिस।
So you're suggesting that there are, research gaps here, specifically, pertaining to the different sectors. Another thing that came to my mind was, do you think that real-time source apportionment studies should also be done? Because अभी तो हम सिर्फ अपनी तरफ से, we don't have any numbers, we don't have any studies or testing that can show कि जो PM 2.5 है, ये किससे बना हुआ है, इसका जो पीएम का कंटेंट है वो एग्रीकल्चर से आ रहा है, कितने परसेंट इन इससे वेहिकुलर एमिशन से आ रहा है. सो हाउ डू यू थिंक इज अ स्टडी लाइक दैट गोइंग टू मेक अ डिफरेंस इन आइडेंटिफाइंग द एक्चुअल सोर्स ऑफ स्मॉग?
सो इसमें सोर्स अपॉर्शनमेंट जो कि बेसिकली स्टडीज होती हैं, आपको बताती हैं कि किसकी क्या कंट्रीब्यूशन है। इसके मॉडल्स डिफरेंट होते हैं। जो आपने जिक्र किया है, इसको आई थिंक बेसिकली ए सैम्पलिंग के थ्रू, और फिर उसकी केमिकल एनालिसिस होता है कि इसके अंदर से हम पता करें कि पर्टिकुलेट के एक्चुअल कंपाउंड्स के हैं, कौन से केमिकल्स हैं इसमें। तो इस तरह की स्टडीज एक्चुअली रिक्वायर लॉट ऑफ कैपेसिटी एंड रिसोर्सेज एज वेल एज सर्टेन डिवाइसेस, जो कि मुश्किल है कि आई थिंक मोर और लेस maybe 1 or 2 universities might have it in Pakistan. In some cases, those samples have to be sent abroad as well. So conducting such a study usually requires a lot of robustness in terms of study design. फिर academic support उसमें चाहिए होती है, relevant people have to be involved, and maybe some international support would be required as well. इसी तरह source apportionment के different models हैं जो activity data को देखते हैं. So right now, I know of a couple of studies who've done both. For example, एक 2006 की स्टडी है, एक 2011 की है, जिसने केमिकल एनालिसिस किया था for certain cities in Pakistan. And similarly, फिर एक्टिविटी लेवल डेटा, लाइक हमारी जीएजी इन्वेंट्री बनती है, उसी तरह एयर emissions की इन्वेंट्री 2015 में बनी थी एक, 2018 में एक हुआ, and then recently again in 2022 भी हुआ। So we have उस तरह के internal analysis as well, especially at Pakistan Air Quality Initiative, हम उस तरह के resources we have internally, but a lot of this, as you mentioned, requires even more research to make sure that the research or the data is valid. So in that case, definitely whatever has existed, उसका भी I do say कि उसका भी review होना चाहिए कि how accurate this
हम्म,
information turned out to be.
या
एक किस्म की monitoring and evaluation exercise. And फिर उसके ऊपर भी you have to build even more stronger studies.
definitely, definitely. So, to us and a lot of other people, smog should be declared as a health emergency. More than 2 million people are right now, suffering from various diseases, both respiratory, skin ailments, people going to the ENT. ये विजिट्स हमारे बहुत ज्यादा हो गए. इट्स नॉट ओनली रेस्पिरेशन नाउ, अब स्किन एलर्जीज हैं, आई इरिटेशन हो रही है बहुत ज्यादा, बल्कि हमारे कई सोशल ग्रुप्स हैं जिसके अंदर ये बात हो रही थी कि जी मुझे स्किन इन्फेक्शंस हो रही हैं. तो ये क्या स्मॉग की
हम्म.
वजह से हो रही है? तो वो एंड इवन ऑन आवर ग्रुप आल्सो. सो व्हाट डू यू थिंक हैज द गवर्नमेंट डन इन ऑर्डर टू क्रिएट अ हाइप फॉर डिक्लेयरिंग इट as a smog as a health emergency, and also के health advisories जो कि बहुत important होती हैं ऐसी situation में, वो क्या adequately address हुई हैं या government कर सकी है या नहीं कर सकी?
So iska, I think this year we did see some activity from the Punjab government, and I talk about Punjab government क्योंकि अभी तक मुल्क में मसला ये है कि everyone thinks it's limited to Punjab. बट एक्चुअली इट्स इम्पैक्ट्स एंटायर कंट्री. हमने अभी जब ये स्मॉग थोड़ी सी बड़ी थी, स्कर्दू के अंदर आई बिलीव डब्ल्यूडब्ल्यूएफ हैज अ मॉनिटर, एंड वहां पे 300 एक्यूआई पहुंचा हुआ था. तो
Yes.
स्कर्दू वेरी स्मॉल पॉपुलेशन, लेकिन वहां पे ट्रांसपोर्ट और कंस्ट्रक्शन जो हो रही है उसके एमिशंस तो हैं. सो इट
Mm-hmm.
इम्पैक्ट्स द एंटायर कंट्री एट दिस पॉइंट. Punjab government was slightly more active at the start of this year, and they released a couple of documents. अब I think this is one thing that we need to recognize, that हमारे environmental issues have worsened because of the political cycle. Because
Mm-hmm.
certain things take precedence when the governments are not in place.
Mm-hmm.
And consistently एक policy maintain करना बहुत ज़रूरी है. When the smog mitigation plan came for Punjab, it basically was a continuation of the Punjab Clean Air Plan of 2023. So
Yeah.
right now we need to think that उससे पहले जो कुछ भी हुआ, maybe we need to consider it not necessarily the starting point. Now 2023 is the starting point when Punjab Clean Air Plan came, and then the smog mitigation plan came in 2024. And uske andar, what we've realized that health is not the focus.
Mm-hmm.
So we, in the air quality experts group, we even issued a statement on 28th October that the mitigation plan is lacking a health angle, and this could lead to serious consequences. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe the government should start considering advisories, और देखेंगे कहाँ पे restrictions लगाई जा सकती हैं, particularly industries and transport पे, but
Yeah.
also उसके अलावा क्या किया जा सकता है. And that is what we saw in the 10 days after 28th October, कि वो नहीं reaction आया in
Mm-hmm.
terms of, and every day you had a certain restriction or a new thing. Green lockdown came, restrictions from schools came, then restrictions for restaurants came, and then eventually the overall lockdown for Lahore and Multan was ordered, even though it was did not go into full effect till even this week. So implementation is definitely a gap, and health advisories again is part of that implementation process. So हमें देखने की ज़रूरत है कि what could additionally be done. यहाँ पे आपके पास बहुत ज़्यादा methods हैं गवर्नमेंट के पास for communication now. So those should be definitely utilized. At the same
Mm-hmm.
time, the plan should have a complete section on what health and education sector wise you will be doing around the year to mitigate this impact in this particular month. So planning well in advance, all this mass distribution should have been happening in early October,
Mm-hmm.
with the messaging that air pollution is getting bad, it might get worse. And at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, we need to now come up with solid public health studies as well. So
Mm-hmm.
studying respiratory impacts, studying the burden of health. I read in a newspaper that there were 5,000 cases of strokes also reported in Lahore during this
Mm-hmm.
period. So no one has studied the impact of on people, especially aged people, जिनको strokes and heart attacks and different चीजें हो रही हैं because of air pollution. And similarly, no relation with skin allergies, eye infections. So a lot of this has to be done. And again, partly it has to be the government to supporting academics, and then academics creating these studies.
Yeah. So you mentioned the green lockdown, but that is just limited to about 11 zones in Lahore. And do you think that was an adequate step? Because, it's not an issue कि वो सिर्फ उन 11 areas का ही है. पूरे लाहौर को देखें, मुल्तान को देखें, पेशावर है, रहीम यार खान है, एंड द AQI लेवल्स आर गोइंग स्काई हाई। तो ये जो
हम्म।
और इसके अंदर कोई 9 या 11 निकात भी हैं इस ग्रीन लॉकडाउन के अंदर, जिसमें वो एक ग्रीन रिंग बनाना है उन्होंने दरख्तों का, एंड थ्री व्हीलर्स, टू व्हीलर्स की उधर वहां पर लॉकडाउन सा वो उसको उसकी बैन लगाना है, कंस्ट्रक्शन एक्टिविटीज को। कहाँ तक ये लॉकडाउन इम्प्लीमेंट होता दिखाई दे रहा है या हुआ है, अगर हुआ भी है तो?
So I think this has been a very interesting discussion with a lot of people, and when I talk to even my own parents or friends, वो सारे एक एग्जांपल बहुत कोट करते हैं कि लाहौर की और पंजाब की हवा बहुत साफ हो गई थी जब कोविड का लॉकडाउन लगा था। सब ये बातें करते हैं, एंड आई थिंक द गवर्नमेंट एक्चुअली इमेजिन दिस लॉकडाउन मच सिमिलर टू कोविड लॉकडाउन, कि लगेगा और साथ ही हवा साफ हो जाएगी, एयर पोल्यूशन खत्म हो जाएगी, बिकॉज आपके पास एग्जाम्पल ही एक्सपेरिमेंट की एग्जाम्पल ही एक है। अब उस दैट इज वेरी डिफरेंट, कोविड पीरियड वाज वेरी डिफरेंट, ये लॉकडाउन केम ऑन 24th March which was already spring season, so
हम्म।
temperature inversion did not exist, crop burning did not exist, and transport और industry emissions जो चल रहे थे वो you were able to quickly shut it down
हम्म।
because people were concerned about their health, कि
हम्म।
हम किसी के पास जाएंगे उससे हमें लग जाएगा।
हम्म।
Smog is
हम्म।
a very different animal, क्योंकि this is not spreading from people to people. This is in
या।
the air already,
हम्म।
and the sources are obviously, transport industry, crop burning. But what are you doing to stop the pollution at source? That is what should be the idea here.
हम्म।
कि गाड़ी का आपको पता है pollution produce करेगी, until you shut down the whole city, the individuals are not going to stop using their cars.
या।
So what else can you do? Restrictions यहाँ पे जिस टाइप की आनी चाहिए वो था कि ऑड इवन सिस्टम आ जाए, यू इम्पोज ऑड इवन सिस्टम फॉर कार्स के ऑड नंबर प्लेट्स एक दिन, इवन नंबर प्लेट्स एक दिन, दैट इज द टाइप ऑफ रिस्ट्रिक्शन
हम्म।
वी सॉ इन दिल्ली, के दिल्ली में जब 2 years के लिए लगा था, so during the odd even period the private four vehicle usage went down by 15% and public transport increased by 10% on during those days. So this could definitely, एट द सेम टाइम फिर इंडस्ट्री का यू हैव टू इमेजिन कि आपकी इंडस्ट्री सोर्सेज कहाँ पे हैं। अब पॉइंट सोर्सेज पे आप क्या रोक रोक सकते हो? यू इम्पोज अ टेक्नोलॉजी दैट बेसिकली रिड्यूसेस द पॉइंट सोर्स एमिशन, वो हवा में आएगी नहीं पोल्यूशन, तो स्मॉग क्रिएट नहीं होगी। सो इन दिस सेंस ग्रीन लॉकडाउन डिड नॉट वर्क बिकॉज इट्स अ वेरी डिफरेंट प्रॉब्लम एंड इट हैज टू बी dealt with more holistically. क्रॉप बर्निंग इज द सेम इशू, कि क्रॉप बर्निंग का जो हमारा अभी तक एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव मेजर है कि यू गो आफ्टर द फार्मर after the farmer has already lit the crops on fire, वो पूरा दिन जल के राख हो चुके हैं, smoke is already in there, then you arrest the farmer. Now
हम्म।
farmer ने अपना जो pollution करनी थी वो कर ली है, he will willingly go to the jail and rest of his family can handle the farm, and does not reduce the pollution. So
या।
even this, अभी तक हमारी वो carrot and stick policy के अंदर से we are just using stick. So that isn't working out well,
या।
and
या।
इसको देखने की जरूरत है कि what else can you do.
That's true. That's true. So, talking about incentives and options in this era of smog. So everybody's talking about air purifiers, and they do work actually, and wearing masks, but these are expensive options. When I talk about face masks, मैं N95 की बात कर रही हूँ, because जो आपका सर्जिकल मास्क है वो तो इस PM 2.5 को इतना केटर भी नहीं कर सकता। और एयर प्योरीफायर्स जो हैं उनकी इस वक्त जो बनाने वाले हैं उनकी चांदी हुई हुई है, एंड इट इज
हम्म।
वेरी डिफिकल्ट फॉर हमारे लो मिडिल इनकम के जो लोग हैं वो किस तरह से अफोर्ड करें। तो हमारे पास वो एक्सेसिबिलिटी नहीं है इन चीजों के लिए, रसाई नहीं है इन चीजों तक, कि ये एक सर्टेन क्लास है जो कि एयर प्योरीफायर्स जो है वो यूज कर सकती है। सो व्हाट वुड यू लाइक टू कमेंट ऑन दैट?
So this is again very similar to COVID के N95 masks prices skyrocketed, 3,000 4,000 का एक mask मिलता था, and people who were well off could afford them, the rest of them could not, and those people started using cloth masks. So it's definitely a class issue in this regard, that people who have access वो सब चीजें करेंगे, जिनको समझ है वो करेंगे। इसके अंदर what I do say is that we might not have the luxury to differentiate between masks. Whatever masking options you have, you should use. So surgical mask might have, 85% effectiveness compared to 99%. Cloth mask might have 60% effectiveness, but at least some bit of the particulate is being stopped.
हम्म।
सो
हम्म।
जिसके पास जो ऑप्शन है वो जरूर करे। आई
या।
सी अ लॉट ऑफ मोटरसाइकिलिस्ट नाउ अराउंड द ईयर, कि उन्होंने अपने मास्क मुंह को लपेटा होता है
या।
while they wear, तो बेसिकली these are your practical examples that people without having data access and everything have
हम्म,
realized कि pollution है and उसे हम कपड़े से रोकें मास्क से रोकें whatever is available वो करना चाहिए. Air
बिल्कुल.
purifiers, of course, this is something that I also have been seeing in the market that you have a lot of these companies coming in and there's no
Yeah.
checks and balances on them कि इनकी effectiveness क्या है.
हम्म.
A lot of people ask me कि आप कुछ recommend करें and I'm saying I can't recommend you brands. What you
Yeah.
should be looking at is two, three different things, which is कि उस air purifier का clean air delivery rate क्या है and what
हम्म.
sort of rooms it is meant for. But these questions don't matter to people who can't afford. उनको
Exactly.
at the end of
हम्म.
the day you have to figure out ways that air ही clean हो. So a
हम्म.
lot of different things have to be done. Not just people living in houses. We have a lot of very urban areas. We have slum areas जहाँ पे basically people have to keep their windows open slightly all around the day क्योंकि उनकी ventilation mechanism ही वही है घर का.
True.
So definitely, this is becoming more and more, human rights issue in this regard that you have to protect the people because most of them cannot have these luxuries.
बिल्कुल. आई वाज जस्ट गोइंग थ्रू अ यूट्यूब वीडियो, डॉक्यूमेंट्री सी थी 1952 की, जो लंदन स्मॉग थी. उसके अंदर लंदन हैज ऑलवेज बीन कंसिडर्ड कि वो एक डेवलप्ड सिटी ही है. सो वहां पर वो गीला करके कपड़ा बांधती थी औरतें, और बच्चों को भी वो पहना कर भेज रहे हैं, और बूढ़ों को भी. देयर वर सम स्पेशलाइज्ड बिग मास्क ऑल्सो जो उधर उस जमाने में थे. मगर ये कपड़ा जो गीला करके बांधने का है, दिस हैज बीन ऑन गोइंग. एंड पाकिस्तान के अंदर भी ये जो भट्टे वाले हैं, जो ईंटें बनाने वाले हैं, वो भी
बिल्कुल.
ये यूज करते हैं, गीला कपड़ा बांध के तो मुंह पे ये बांधते हैं. सो इससे मुझे याद है कि अब हमारी नेशनल ईवी पॉलिसी भी आ गई है, ठीक है ना, इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स की. सो गिविंग द द सोशियो इकोनॉमिक कंडीशंस हमारे मुल्क की जो हैं, अब ईवी जो गाड़ी है वो करोड़ रुपए से ऊपर की आपको मिलेगी, ठीक है ना. हमारे सिर्फ लाहौर के अंदर देखें तो 6 मिलियन व्हीकल्स अभी रजिस्टर्ड जो हैं वो चल रहे हैं. हम किस तरह से देख सकते हैं कि 2030 तक 40% या 30% ईवी पे सब गाड़ियां जाएंगी, और यूरो 6 स्टैंडर्ड एकदम से आ जाएगा, क्योंकि हमारी फ्यूल क्वालिटीज क्वाइट लो, और वो यूरो 4 भी नहीं है. तो आप कैसे देखते हो कि इसको हम, हाउ डू वी सी द फ्यूचर? 2030 इज जस्ट 5 years. और हम किस तरह
हम्म.
से, आपको लगता है कि हम 30% के करीब गाड़ियों को ईवी पे ट्रांसफर कर देंगे, और यूरो 6 फ्यूल भी आ जाएगा? हाउ डू यू सी दिस ट्रांजिशन हैपनिंग?
No, very interesting question because abhi recently the government announced that it wants to revise down the electricity tariff for charging stations and battery stations. They are trying to come up with incentives on how to drive this change. But you're very right. कि हमारे पास already, and it's not by the way 6 million, 7 million according to the recent excise data for March 2024. And I tell people कि अगर लाहौर district की population is 13 to 14 million and district में ही 7 million vehicles registered and that's basically one vehicle for every two people. And इसी तरह if you look at Islamabad's ratio is one vehicle for every one person. इतने ज़्यादा वहाँ cars registered, cars and bikes, everything has been registered. So one thing that I target of 20-30% uh, is not easy to achieve. There is, ideas on how to do it, and I think government probably has access to these ideas as well. A lot of people are ignoring the fact that अगर मुल्क में Pakistan, for example, right now 30 million bikes are officially registered all over the country. Punjab has the biggest chunk of these. Uh, but people are forgetting that when you mean by transition, you don't say 30% of new vehicles. I think this is a wrong approach. You are saying that हम और vehicles road पे डालेंगे, but वो electric होंगी.
हम्म.
What you should be saying that existing 30 million vehicles हैं, 30 million bikes हैं, how can you retrofit and change the engines out to and add motors in those places?
हम्म.
So in this regard, you just don't need to do new sales. What you will be doing is existing vehicles, existing bikes or rickshaws can also be converted to electric, and that actually adds to the 30% target that you put in place. उसके साथ साथ the other thing we need to be really realistic about is that हमारे यहाँ transport additions are not necessarily going to bring the biggest change. Addition of public transport is going to bring the biggest change. So public transport in next 5 years is very much possible. You can fill up each of your big cities can have a couple of more metro lines.
Hmm.
and those metro buses, all of them need to be electric. So this is where the conversation should be heading कि आपको पता है कि cities की growth जिस तरह हुई है, now you don't have one downtown, you have multiple. आपने हर जगह छोटे छोटे city cores बना दिए हैं. Each of those city cores have to be served by a bus. अभी just giving you Lahore's example because Lahore has two systems now. This is the most any Pakistan city has. So if you look at the data for the last station जो Shadra station है for metro bus, and then you look at जो कसूर के पास
कसूर का है।
लगता है जाके बस का ही, एंड वहां से एक एक्सटेंशन बन चुकी हुई है जो स्पीडो बस को लेके जाती है वेरी क्लोज टू कसूर. उन दो स्टॉप्स का both entry points has the highest number of usage in the entire metro bus system because people from Sheikhupura and people from Kasur come into Lahore to work. So they
हम्म।
are using these transport system. If you provide them and you build the system to a larger extent, आप उनके बाइक यूजेज आप उनका रिक्शा यूजेज ऐसे भी कम कर सकते हैं.
हम्म।
So you don't necessarily need to have the bike population increase by 30%. You can retrofit them while you add public transport, which helps you again electricity incentives उनके लिए भी applicable है, and they reduce, they'll be reducing emissions much more than any of the individual electric vehicles.
Yeah, yeah. So, of course, Pakistan is a signatory to the Paris Agreement, जिसमें हमारी कुछ कमिटमेंट्स भी हैं कि हम एनडीसीज नेशनली डिटरमिन्ड कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस जो हैं 2021 में हमने लास्ट रिवाइज सबमिट कराए थे, जिसमें वी
Hmm.
प्लेज्ड कि 50% हम कंडीशनल बिजनेस एज यूजुअल जो है वो 2030 तक ओवरऑल एमिशंस को कम करेंगे. उस हवाले से हाउ डू यू थिंक कि वी कैन लेवरेज दैट अपॉर्चुनिटी टू रिड्यूस द एमिशंस, यानी एनर्जी के, ट्रांसपोर्ट के, एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर, जो कि तीन बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट सेक्टर्स हैं और कुछ हद तक कंट्रीब्यूटर्स हैं स्मॉग के लिए, एयर क्वालिटी को पोल्यूट करने के लिए फर्दर. तो हाउ डू यू थिंक कि हम उनको कंट्रीब्यूट या उसकी मिटिगेशन मेजर्स के लिए या उसको बेहतर बनाने के लिए जो गवर्नमेंट ने एनडीसीज में कमिटमेंट की हुई हैं, क्या हम इसको लेवरेज कर सकते हैं, दिस अपॉर्चुनिटी ऑफ दीज एनडीसीज?
So, in the sense that a lot of our NDCs are not focused on air quality, but given that हमारा fuel use or our GHG emissions and air quality emissions both are from the same source, we
हम्म।
can definitely leverage this or these opportunities. If you look at the recent, I think in the past 6 to 7 years, जितने भी carbon market projects हैं, उनमें there's a sizable chunk जो transport oriented है. So
हम्म।
up to 35% of the projects listed in recent exchanges, either it's some form of public transport or it's some sort of charging platform for electric vehicles, uptake of basically zero emission vehicles.
हम्म।
So this is a good opportunity. At the same time, a lot of those projects have been driven by the private sector
हम्म।
and not just by the government. So
हम्म।
government has access to large amounts of finance anyway, especially through its international partners and MDBs. उनके पास है, but I do think हमारे जो local manufacturers हैं, they should be exploring these opportunities, especially EV makers जो already exist करते हैं. They need to come up with ideas and projects that align a lot of the carbon finance into their own mechanism, which also makes the business model much more sustainable for them.
हम्म।
So both from the consumer angle, consumer drive, uptake can be increased, but also from a company's own profit bottom line, it benefits them as well. So
हम्म।
it's a good opportunity, and I do see that in the next 4 or 5 years, इस पे भी काम होगा. One other sector that I think can easily be, put in line using this is your clean cook stove sector,
हम्म।
because as I mentioned, the residential and domestic uh, proportion to pollution is increasing because of gas shortages, and
हम्म।
that when that goes to cook stoves, those are usually पुराने जो आपके चूल्हे होते हैं कि 3 ईंटें रख के 4 ईंटें रख के बीच में उधर ही बायोमास डाला,
हम्म।
उधर ही थोड़ा सा अपने काव डंग डाल दिया, उसको जला दिया. So इसको ट्रांसफॉर्म करने के लिए again you need resources because majority of your population is not going to come and buy those cook stoves at price for you. So you
हम्म।
need the climate finance to drive that uptake as well. So
हम्म।
अभी तक I think no one has seriously explored these opportunities, but this definitely exists. And by 2030, the quantum of finance coming for these sources will also increase.
So, my second last question would be that हम आर्टिफिशियल रेन की भी बात करते हैं, वो कितनी इफेक्टिव होती है। आज हमें सुबह ही कोई कह रहा था, एक मीटिंग में थी मैं, उन्होंने कहा आर्टिफिशियल रेन के बहुत ज्यादा ड्रॉबैक्स भी होते हैं, हमें तो उसका पता ही नहीं है। तो हम ये कहते हैं कि हाँ जी हमने कर दी और उससे बहुत बेहतरी आएगी, तो क्या इसका कोई ड्रॉबैक भी है? एंड माय सेकंड क्वेश्चन वुड बी कि बीजिंग के अंदर जो स्मॉग टावर अपेरेंटली लगाए हुए थे, जिनकी एफिकेसी इज अ बिग क्वेश्चन मार्क है अभी, तो क्या हम वैसी कोई चीज यहाँ पर बना सकते हैं? चलो हम उसे ब्लैक कार्बन से डायमंड ना बनाएं, लेकिन क्या हम उसको कार्बन कैप्चर टेक्नोलॉजी टाइप चीज कुछ कर सकते हैं, या पीएम कैप्चर टाइप टेक्नोलॉजी जैसे है?
So number one, all the smog towers in China have been closed now. None of them operate because they were always a gimmick and they failed very, very massively.
या।
इंडिया में दिल्ली में दो लगाए थे स्मॉग टावर्स एंड इस साल के शुरू में कोर्ट ऑर्डर्ड वैलिडेशन एक्सरसाइज ऑफ देम।
हम्म। हम्म।
उनकी जब रिपोर्ट सबमिट की गई तो पता ये चला कि वो विद इन जो उसके इमीडिएट 50 मीटर्स हैं उसमें वो 60 to 70% रिडक्शन करता है। एट द सिटी लेवल इट हैज जीरो इम्पैक्ट।
हम्म।
So now those towers have also been shut down in Delhi,
हम्म।
and recently the Delhi municipal government decided to convert them into museums as a ode to the air quality issues of Delhi.
हम्म।
So none of this, particularly the small towers, cannot work for Lahore or any part of Punjab.
हम्म।
The other thing with artificial rain, so last year भी यही हुआ था कि artificial rain was conducted and said कि this is both very effective, but
हम्म।
data showed that there was no rain. Number one, even this time Lahore में there has been no rain. It's basically
हम्म।
the westerly wind system that comes
या।
in, breaks the inversion and pushes the pollution and it disperses over a larger region then. So
हम्म।
artificial rain has been ineffective completely for
हम्म।
this. But the idea Pakistan had basically originated by the use of artificial rain in the UAE. And in the UAE, it does not, it, no, they do not have smog over here, very serious smog, and they do not use artificial rain for dealing with air pollution.
हम्म।
Their primary issue is concerns of water. They have this very serious water issues, water
हम्म।
shortage issues, and it's ranked as severe in the world indexes. And what they do is they try to get as much water into their soil using artificial rain as much possible because
हम्म।
they do not have a monsoon season. They only get rains during winter, and they try to maximize that volume of water जो उन soil में जाए.
हम्म।
So it's not used to control pollution. In very rare cases, कभी भी use हुआ for pollution. In China, it was used once or twice, and वहाँ पे भी नजर आया कि rain does not reduce pollution. It's the wind system, and wind system government cannot create.
या।
Wind system automatically, naturally बनता है, and winter में westerly winds होती हैं. Sometimes they come, sometimes it's stagnant. So
हम्म।
we have to be very aware. What peers have been, mentioned, वो यही है कि if you start a artificial rain and वो आपके हाथ से बाहर निकल जाए, which also happened in the UAE, how do you control the volume of water which could
हम्म।
potentially come? So
हम्म।
हमारे यहाँ, because rain clouds already don't have any volume of water in winter, very little. I think December या January में there will be some big spells. Otherwise, नहीं होती post monsoon period.
हम्म।
So those risks aren't there, but overall, artificial rain is not effective to control this.
Okay. So my last question, not a question, actually a message for the general public as to what they can do as individuals to sort of, tackle smog, or at their individual level, how should they react or be prepared during this smog season and throughout the year too?
Mm. So I've been telling everyone that your primary responsibility is to protect your own health, your family's health, and masking should be encouraged for everyone.
Hmm.
If you have, if you go to a university, if you're a student, ask for friends to mask up. If you are an employee working somewhere, make sure that your, office has a masking policy. And if you want to drive bigger change, you have to, talk in your workplaces about this. कि आप लोग कैसे कारपूलिंग वगैरह कर सकते हैं because आपको पता है सोर्स क्या है. The other thing is that we have to have broader discussions on this. बहुत easy होता है to say that इस तरह आ रहा है, उस तरह नहीं आ रहा है. I see a lot of people जो मोटरवे पे ट्रैवल कर रहे होते हैं and they're usually driving at 120 kilometers per hour, और वो जलते हुए खेत की फोटो लेके आते हैं पोल्यूशन यहाँ से आ रहा है while they're accelerating in a car themselves. So this is very easy to इस तरह blame shift करना कि मेरी गाड़ी से नहीं आ रहा पोल्यूशन, उसके खेत से आ रहा है. सो you have to be very cognizant of the fact कि ये चीज़ें तब तक रिजॉल्व नहीं होंगी जब तक आप लोग सब अंडरस्टैंड नहीं करोगे कि इशू कहाँ पे है. Of course, crop burning is a big issue, and especially on the Indian Punjab, it's a very big issue.
Yeah,
We cannot end air pollution issues without tackling this problem as well. So
definitely.
we need to see that the discussion does not go into blames, but also recognizes कि इसका किया क्या जा सकता है. And I do see that there's more and more interest in the subject compared to previous years. So hopefully we're moving in a more constructive manner in the coming years.
Thank you, Dawar. Thank you so much. We have plenty of questions in the
Yeah.
chat box, but I will pick up just few. Okay, so what does Pakistan Air Quality Initiative dashboard sort of entails? How do you people gather this data? What sort of low cost monitors are being used?
So we pretty much use the same IQ air monitors that have been deployed. We have some monitors from Air Gradient and Purple Air as well. So we're
Mm,
trying to see, basically, as you mentioned, the data में differences क्या है.
mm, mm,
So if you place different technologies together, we can actually assess में उनमें differences. Are they all showing the same results,
mm,
or is there a difference? The dashboard side is basically to see if we can, start collating them all together.
mm,
We have shared data with some government partners through our dashboard. It's not a public dashboard, but basically between interaction between agencies, ताकि उन्हें भी पता चले. And then at the same time, we're trying to see if we can have locally deployed sensors, such as some universities have developed sensors. Can we validate those sensors and also put them into the system? Because we cannot for all time keep on importing more and more devices. It has to be
mm.
localized to an extent. So we're
Exactly,
trying to do
exactly.
that as well.
Bilkul. And so there's a question that share your ideas on the LG based smog towers. एक तो ये भी है और मेरे ख्याल में mosses जो use हो रही हैं they also absorb particulate matter. अब I don't know उसकी कितनी studies हुई हुई हैं globally on PM 2.5 and PM 10 to absorb the efficacy of that. So
Mhm.
you've got any idea
So
on that?
this is still a, I think, misconception that we deal with, that trees and plants cannot fight off smog. They can fight off dust, but smog ka particulate hai, they cannot really deal with it.
Hmm.
There was this recent post by someone who works for, he used to be a forester, a government official, and now he works independently. And he had posted that the newly planted saplings in Changamanga have been dying during the past couple of weeks because इतनी शदीद smog है और उन्हें सूरज नहीं मिल रहा. So this is what I keep on telling people, that it's dangerous for us, it's dangerous for plants, it's dangerous for animals.
Yeah.
I have friends whose pets have died as a result of respiratory diseases in Lahore.
Mm-hmm.
So their pet dogs were developed diseases. So of course wildlife is being
Mm-hmm.
impacted, normal pets are
Yes.
being impacted.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
plants, this one thing is they absorb CO2 and they absorb some VOCs, which is organic compounds, and in some very few plants also absorb your some sort of nitrogen oxides as well.
Mm-hmm.
None of them can absorb PM2.5.
Mm-hmm.
So PM2.5 particulate, इसके term different होती है, इसे कहते हैं adsorb. Adsorb is basically they
Absorb,
form a
yeah.
layer over.
Just sedimentation
Yeah,
deposits होते हैं बस उसके. बिल्कुल,
exactly. They
बिल्कुल,
deposit
बिल्कुल.
over the plant, but after a certain point, it cannot be more effective than that.
Mm-hmm.
So, ये जरूर है कि plants will not be effective. These technologies like moss towers as well, they're meant for greenhouse gas reduction. They're
Yes.
not meant for PM2.5 reductions.
Mm-hmm.
So, वो उसके लिए effective नहीं है. So I don't think these technologies will help us. In all of this, all of this dynamic, the solution eventually is that you have to reduce pollution at the point source.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of questions here. एक question है any tree species. So basically any kind of tree जो कि आपके urbanized areas में banyan है, neem है, maple है, अमलतास वगैरह जो यहाँ के indigenous trees हैं लाहौर के भी और पंजाब के mostly उनमें definitely they don't particulate matter जैसे हम dust particle है वो उसको absorb नहीं कर सकता सिर्फ उसके ऊपर
Hmm.
डिपॉजिट हो सकते हैं बट एट द सेम टाइम डिफरेंट कार्बन एमिशंस जो हैं वो उसको जरूर एब्जॉर्ब करने में हेल्प करता है और एक और
हम्म।
क्वेश्चन मैंने देखा था कि WWF पाकिस्तान, यस, हमने 15 सिटीज में AQI मॉनिटर्स जो हैं वो इंस्टॉल किए हुए हैं। प्लस एक सवाल था वाइल्ड लाइफ का, तो वाइल्ड लाइफ और बर्ड स्पीशीज के ऊपर देर आर मेनी रिसर्चेस ग्लोबली, उनकी हेल्थ, रिप्रोडक्शन, रेस्पिरेशन पे बहुत इफेक्ट होता है, स्पेशली इस सीजन के अंदर पाकिस्तान में माइग्रेटरी बर्ड्स आते हैं, जिसकी वजह कभी तो बिकॉज ऑफ स्मॉग दे कांट इवन फाइंड देयर डायरेक्शन कि उन्होंने जाना कहाँ है। एंड उनके जो नेस्टिंग और जो एरियाज हैं जहां पर उनको जाकर उनकी अफजाइश के जगह जराए जो कहते हैं, असल में मैंने उर्दू में ही पढ़ा था और दिया था इंटरव्यू, तो मैं वही बता रही हूँ। सो वो जो जगह है उन तक पहुंचने के लिए वो देर हो जाती है उनको, उनकी खाने पीने के जराए तक पहुंचने के लिए उनको दे आर डिलेज। सो definitely wildlife is being affected, and Dawa, you're right in saying that dogs and cats, उनको बहुत ज्यादा respiration के मसले हो रहे हैं, and yes, it's not only
There's
humans,
actually
it's also
there's
animals.
actually this movie an Indian filmmaker made about the New Delhi, and I think it won the Academy Award as well. कि
Yes,
दिल्ली
yes.
के जो उनके जो वो होते हैं चिड़ियाएं थी वो गिरना शुरू हो गई थी
Hmm,
ड्यूरिंग
hmm,
स्मॉग
hmm,
सीजन
hmm, hmm,
because they
hmm,
were dying because of the smog in the air.
hmm,
So they captured it and they also instituted a measure कि if some of them survive, can we bring them back to health as well?
hmm, hmm,
So it's
hmm.
very, deeply impacting on overall all sorts of life forms.
यस। सो एक क्वेश्चन आया है somebody फ्रॉम पाकपतन कि राइस स्ट्रॉ बर्निंग जो है वो काफी सिग्निफिकेंटली रिड्यूस हुई है इस साल, एंड फार्मर्स आर प्रिपेयरिंग बेल्स और कलेक्टिंग राइस स्ट्रॉ यूजिंग कबूटा हार्वेस्टर्स, जो कि अब नया है। आई बिलीव दिस इज ट्रूली नॉट अ मेजर कंट्रीब्यूटर दिस टाइम। व्हाट डू यू थिंक?
Actually, there's no more crop burning in our Punjab and Indian Punjab both this year,
हम्म,
based on previous year. So compared to
हम्म,
previous year, it
या,
both started earlier and there was more. And this is based on satellite thermal anomalies that
हम्म,
the crop burning has been above what it used to be. It's not above by say 50-30%. It's above by 5-10% compared to last year.
So there's a question which is also interesting and difficult. What are the nature-based solutions for smog?
Number one, of course, nature-based, as I'm mentioning, that crop burning के लिए you have to come up with a nature-based solution. And similarly for clean cooking वगैरह as well. हमें अभी तक जो waste का हमारा handling है, that's understood to be something that the government does. But in other parts of the world, it's basically a function that the government pays someone and they handle the waste.
Hmm,
So this is what you need to do for crop burning as well. One of the models which is quite successful in some villages in India is that the government puts a support price on the crop waste itself.
hmm,
So we did a rough calculation, I think 2-3 years back, that it will take about 1,500 to 2,000 rupees cater to the waste of 1 acre of leftovers for
hmm,
rice. And uske andar, this includes all the labor plus truck costs. आपको trolley लेनी पड़ेगी to handle that waste and send it to someone. So at that time, 3 years ago, it was costing 1,500 to 2,000 rupees. Now,
hmm,
obviously, it will be 2-3 times that. So that support price is instituted. Government buys that waste and sells it to someone who runs a biodiesel refinery or digester that can handle that waste. Or you utilize it in other ways. Okay, can you use it in an incinerator, which is properly filtered and controlled and generate
hmm,
power from it?
hmm,
So
hmm,
basically, you have to change this whole dynamic that crop residue has to be handled some way. It cannot be left on the land because then you will not have food on your table. पूरे पंजाब में खाना नहीं होगा if crops cannot grow. So you
yeah,
have to handle the crop residue issue. उसको करने के लिए you have to institute these solutions. There are a bunch of things that are being done. Similarly और भी हैं. I think we need to see that this problem has gone to a point where nature itself is now at risk. So nature-based solutions will only provide marginal improvements until we bring it back to a point where they can become significant contributions.
hmm. Another interesting question is that how much will EVs, यानी इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स जो हैं, वो ग्रीन हाउस गैस emissions में एडिशन तो नहीं करेंगे कहीं, बिकॉज डिपेंडेंसी ऑन एनर्जी, गिवन कि पाकिस्तान एक एनर्जी स्कार्स या क्राइसिस में ही रहता है, लोड शेडिंग का इंक्रीज होता है। और अभी मैंने रिसेंटली पढ़ा था कि जी वो डीसी चार्जर्स लगाएंगे 10 किलोमीटर से 15 किलोमीटर के फासले पे, एंड देन हाईवेज पे 20 से 25 किलोमीटर के फासले पे। डू यू थिंक इट्स रियली वर्केबल, या कोई ग्रीन हाउस गैस एमिशंस पे फर्क आएगा, बढ़ेगा, कम होगा?
ये डेफिनेटली कम होगा. इफ यू लुक एट लाइफ साइकिल एनालिसिस ऑफ EVs, it's about one third or one fourth of your existing hybrid vehicles. So they're definitely less than the conventional. The
हम्म,
other thing is that a lot of people have this misconception कि पाकिस्तान में लोड शेडिंग होती है बिकॉज हमारे पास पावर स्टेशंस या पावर कैपेसिटी कम है.
या
हमारी लोड शेडिंग होती है बिकॉज वी कैन नॉट पे द पावर
या
स्टेशंस.
या
So when you have more EVs on the road, you have higher electricity usage, which means that you will be actually be able to pay the producer as well, and आपकी load shedding actually कम होगी by putting
हम्म
EVs on the road. So
हम्म
this has to be a different discussion. The risk is right now is that हम EVs की बात तो बहुत ज़्यादा करते हैं, but EV adoption is completely dependent on the consumer. So
या
all of these plans, charging stations, all of that does not matter till the price point is consumer friendly. And
यस
उसके लिए there is no incentive right now in the market.
हम्म
The incentive is कि हमने बस उस पर ड्यूटी नहीं लगाई, but incentive has to increase beyond that, that you put taxes on polluting vehicles and say that the tax that you're generating using it is going to offset the cost of the electric vehicles.
हम्म
So this is how China did it. This is how other places in the world are doing it. So you
हम्म
have to
हम्म
come up with these different models के low emission zones हैं, वहाँ पे सिर्फ electric vehicles allowed हैं. You don't allow
हम्म
polluting vehicles. Polluting vehicles आएंगी तो उन्हें toll pay करना होगा. Again, that toll goes back to the government, and then government creates a incentive using that money for more EV adoption. So
हम्म
some of these models, especially consumer adoption पे बहुत काम की जरूरत है अभी भी.
Definitely. And there also has to be a lot of consumer awareness that needs to be built. And to that, I think there's a question also, okay, what is WWF doing? So we as an environmental NGO, our role is of a watchdog. We give policy recommendations जो हम 2015 से, because WWF Smog Commission का हिस्सा भी रह चुका हुआ है, वॉलंटरी कमेटी का हिस्सा भी रह चुके हैं, अभी स्मॉग 2017 की जो पॉलिसी बनी थी और जो रीसेंट रिविजन हुई है उसको भी हमने रिकमेंडेशंस दिए. वी ऑलवेज मेक श्योर कि हम स्कूल्स, कॉलेजेस, यूनिवर्सिटीज अपने सोशल मीडिया प्लेटफॉर्म्स के थ्रू, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मीडिया के प्लेटफॉर्म के थ्रू वी एजुकेट पीपल. हम लेमैन को बता सकें कि इसका किस तरह से हम प्रिकॉशनरी मेजर्स ले सकते हैं एज एन इंडिविजुअल. बहुत सी चीजें जो दावर ने भी आज कही वो बहुत गवर्नमेंट लेवल पे या पॉलिसी लेवल पर होने वाली हैं, लेकिन कुछ चीजें जो इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे हैं, ही ऑल्सो टॉक्ड अबाउट देम. बट आई थिंक इफ आई सम इट अप आज की कॉन्वर्सेशन, तो बहुत जल्दी, और हमें वो कहते हैं ना, निप द इविल इन द बड, हमें सोर्सेज पे जाकर उनको कंट्रोल करने की जरूरत है, प्रोएक्टिव होने की जरूरत है. जैसे हम अभी बात कर रहे थे, एक क्वेश्चन था सोशियो इकोनॉमिक्स को कंसिडर करना चाहिए, इनइक्वालिटीज को कंसिडर करना चाहिए. सो यस, द गवर्नमेंट शुड इंसेंटिवाइज फार्मर्स ताकि उनको लो इंटरेस्ट के ऊपर वो हैप्पी सीडर्स या वो जो द काइंड ऑफ हार्वेस्टर्स दैट आर रिक्वायर्ड फॉर ये जो क्रॉप बर्निंग के इशू को रिजॉल्व कर सके, उसके लिए उनको सॉफ्ट लोन्स दिए जाएं, लो इंटरेस्ट के लोन्स दिए जाए, जैसे ग्रीन फाइनेंसिंग के सोलर के ऊपर इंटरेस्ट, लेस इंटरेस्ट के साथ आपको सोलर पैनल्स मिल रहे थे उस पे. तो उसी तरह की स्कीम्स निकालने की जरूरत है हमें. इंडस्ट्रीज के ऊपर भी आई थिंक द गवर्नमेंट ऑफिशियल देयर हैज टू बी स्ट्रांग इम्प्लीमेंटेशन. हमारे डॉक्यूमेंट्स आर अमेजिंग, पाकिस्तान की जो पॉलिसीज हैं दे आर अमेजिंग. आई हैव गॉन थ्रू कंपैरिजन भी हमने किया हुआ, स्पेशली विद आवर नेबरिंग कंट्री, एंड वी हैव अमेजिंग पॉलिसीज. बट द ओनली थिंग इज कि ये जो दावर आपने भी बात की कि गवर्नमेंट्स चेंज हो जाती हैं, फिर प्रायोरिटीज चेंज हो जाती हैं, पिछले टारगेट्स को मीट नहीं किया होता और अब नई गवर्नमेंट आ जाती है. So that also needs to be fixed. And we need to have a lot of political stability in the country in order to, address this issue. So on that note, thank you so much for your participation, Dawar, and the rest of the participants. If you have more questions, please reach out to us on our WWF Pakistan information site. Thank you so much, Dawar, and hope to speak to you soon. Thank you so much.